The OWCS season is starting back up again, and we get to see a lot of new teams and new players. So today, I'm going to quickly go over each of these teams and generally give my thoughts and predictions for how I think this stage will go. I'm fully expecting to be wrong with every single one of these predictions, so I guess we'll just see what happens. In this video, I'll only be covering EMEA and North America, so if you want to see a video on Asia, just let me know. Also, about 11% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so do me a favor and subscribe if you like my stuff. We're getting closer and closer to 2,000 subs, and I'd really like to hit that milestone soon. I'll be covering the OWCS season as it happens, so subscribe if you want to see more of that. With that said, let's start off with the EMEA teams first. In EMEA, we have 3 partner teams, those being Virtus.pro, Gen G, and Twisted Minds. Starting out with Gen G, this is certainly a team we haven't seen in a long time. For those of you who don't know, Gen G were the owners of the Seoul Dynasty, so it's really nice to see them return to Overwatch Esports. This Gen G roster consists of Sauna and Top Dragon on DPS, Crispy and Kanale on support, and Mag on tank. This team is certainly a hodgepodge of talent, with some players who certainly have a lot to prove. Sauna showed us last year that he is a really good DPS player, and pairing him with a player as good as Top Dragon will certainly yield some good results. However, concerns arise as they don't really have a true hitscan player, since both of these are more known for their flex DPS. I'm not really sure how much this will matter, considering that we know that both of these two players are quite flexible, and should be able to handle hitscan duties. This backline have both shown some really great play, namely Kanale and Virtus.pro last season, so I'm curious to see how this duo does. Magazine, on the other hand, has a lot of questions as a solo tank. We've seen him play really well on traditional main tank heroes like Winston, Ball, or Rhine, but I'm pretty worried about his performance on off-tank heroes like D.Va, Sigma, or Zarya. If Mag can step up his game, this team could absolutely shoot for a top spot in EMEA, but if he doesn't, then maybe they won't make it. Virtus.pro have also assembled a very interesting mixed roster, with Shockwave and JWoo on DPS, Pistola solo tanking, and Gala and Fixa in the backline. Starting with this DPS lineup, Shockwave has already proven himself as an elite level hitscan, so I don't have a ton of worries there. Some people might have doubts about JWoo, but from what I've seen, he's a very capable flex DPS who might really have a chance to shine on this team if everything clicks, and show the average viewer just how good he is. Pistola is a pretty solid solo tank, having really good performances last year and being a top 3 tank in EMEA, although I'd prefer if he had a little help for those tanks he's just not as comfortable on. This backline is going to be very interesting, with Gala being able to go back and play some more flex supports, and with Fixa running calculations on the main support. I've seen a good amount of criticism on Fixa being here, but honestly, he's a pretty underrated main support. He played pretty well during his time in Philly, and he's got a lot to prove, as does this whole team. But if things go well, this team could be very dangerous. The last of the 3 partner teams is Twisted Minds, and this team made some significant upgrades from last season. For starters, this backline of Funny Astro and Irony is a nice upgrade from last season. Funny Astro is widely considered to be the best EMEA main support, and Irony is a pretty good flex support player who can absolutely perform well in a good environment. This tank line is pretty nice and very flexible, having both Hottie and TVNT to be able to cover both off and main tanks. Although they aren't quite as mechanically talented as players like Pistola or Qadsiah, they do have a lot of help to cover each other's weaknesses, and I think they will be very strong throughout this year. The DPS line of Psycho and Quartz will be nasty all season long. I don't really expect Yubi to play much, and that might be for the best, knowing his history. Psycho has shown he's an extremely good flex DPS, and I mean, Quartz doesn't even need an introduction. Now that he won't have to 1v5 every single game, I'm very excited to see what kind of performances Quartz can have. He was an absolute monster last season, and now that he has a competent team, he might be even better. I expect this team to probably place top 2, if not number 1, but there's one team in EMEA that I think might have them beat this year. The Ultimates are a new team that last competed in European Contenders all the way back in 2022, but they make their triumphant return to Overwatch Esports with potentially the strongest roster in EMEA. On the DPS line, they have former ENT's DPS duo, Kai and Kevster, and having Kevster alone immediately raises this team's ceiling. You know, having the best player in EMEA will do that. Chase and KSA make up this tank line, and they have a real potential to be the best tank line in EMEA. Chase didn't get much of a chance to shine last season due to various visa issues, so hopefully he'll get to show everyone his talent this year. And I mean, KSA was an absolute monster last season, and he's widely considered to be a top 2 tank in EMEA. Allowing him to play as comfort heroes and having Chase fill in the gaps will probably make this an extremely solid and flexible tank lineup. The backline is probably the strangest part of this team though, with Korean main support Faith alongside Skyrippa and Ana legend Twilight. I'm not exactly sure what the plan for flex support is, but from what I know, I think Skyrippa is the one starting. The support lineup has some serious issues, but it also has some serious upside if things go well. Having a veteran like Twilight could help these guys develop, and honestly might have them be even better. Seriously, this team could contend for the #1 spot in EMEA. This team did get first in the Swiss, so they're looking to continue to dominate. Keep an eye out for these guys. Also qualifying to Stage 1 are Sakura Esports, Team Peps, Team Vision, and I don't really know how to say this one, so I'm just going to call them AQ, I just don't want to mess it up. Starting with Sakura Esports though, this team has some really good underdog players, with China and Zoro making their return from last season on the DPS line. Hitori has proven herself as a very good tank player, and has been doing really well over in Calling All Heroes on Nightmare Eclipse. I'm not as familiar with Crota and Streber, but from what I've seen so far, they look like a pretty solid support line, and they hopefully can show us some real potential. I don't expect a ton from this team, but I'm just hoping they can show us what they're made of and potentially give us some really good games. Team Peps has a lot more players that I'm more familiar with the DPS lineup of former Overwatch League legend Soon, alongside the Belgian DPS Ken and the Spanish hitscan Exodial. Last season, Exodial exploded onto the scene, surprising a lot of viewers, and I'm really interested to see what he has in store for us this season. Aiznam will be solo tanking for this team, which will be tough, but I'm pretty sure that Poco is a sub in case that's needed. From what I saw last season though, Ice looks like a pretty solid tank prospect, but he'll have to show what he's made of to show that he can compete this season. FD God and Zerion make up the support line, and this French backline has some serious potential assuming that neither of them feed. This team has a lot of question marks, but are for real a great team that I believe has a lot of potential to punch upwards in this stage. With an explosive player like Exodial manning the helm, you can never truly count this team out. AQ is a really interesting team, and I have no idea where they're going to place. On DPS, you have former Twisted Minds Pharah One Trick Labda, although from what it sounds like, he'll be playing more than just Pharah this time. Alongside him is QLM, a Saudi hitscan player that I've actually never heard of before. The real interesting part of this DPS line though, is former Overwatch League champion Checkmate, who is making a return to EMEA and could really help this team get some serious success. You know he knows how to win, you know how good this guy is, he can help lead this team to a lot more success than I think people are willing to give them credit for. On the tank line is Shred, who played for Gaming Gladiators last season, and Zayad, who is a Saudi Arabian off-tank player. Shred showed his talents last season, but I'm unfamiliar with Zayad, so I'm pretty curious to see how he'll do. On support, we got Landon, who decided to spend yet another season over in EMEA after his season with Spacestation Gaming, and his main support partner will be Haku, who played pretty well in the Overwatch World Cup a few years ago. Overall, this team doesn't have a ton of crazy superstars, but they look like a pretty solid team who I think has a real chance to compete upside a lot of these other teams throughout this year. The final EMEA team is Team Vision, who made it as the 5th seed from the qualifiers after surviving the lower bracket. This team has a lot of players that haven't really been seen a ton in OWCS, but a few players stick out from last season. AOY and One in particular are both pretty well-known Saudi Arabian support players, but I doubt we'll see much play from One considering that Korean support player Simple is on this team. Simple has been really good for a long time now, and he could really help elevate this squad. Alongside him is Korean DPS Taejong, who could help this team fight for a good spot. There's a lot of question marks on this team and a lot of players who are going to prove themselves in the following few weeks, but overall, this team will really have to put in some serious work if they want to compete. Now, as for my prediction, my 2 teams that I have making it to the championship clash out of EU are going to be the Ultimates and Twisted Minds. As a whole, I feel that these 2 teams are the strongest on paper from EMEA. These teams have a lot more upside than some of the others, and I think they have what it takes to get top 2. That being said though, I am fully prepared to be dead wrong, and I would not be surprised if Gen.G, Virtus.pro, or even Team Peps made it through. I'm very excited to see how this ends up, and I really hope we get some great matches. Regardless of the outcome, the EMEA region is stacked this year, and I'm really excited to see what they can show us. Now, moving over to the NA region, we only have 2 partnered teams this time. Spacestation Gaming will make their return, this time moving over to North America, fielding a pretty stacked roster. The DPS line, we have Seeker and Sugar Free, which makes a very strong core and will really help this team succeed. Sugar Free showed everyone last season that he is an elite level flex DPS, and he was also the best NA DPS player last season. Seeker played really well last season on Nightmare, and he has shown just how strong of a hitscan player he can be. Kellen the Felon will be solo taking on this team, which does prove a little, concern about its flexibility, but he's been playing really well as of late, and he certainly brings a lot to this team. If he's able to play some of these other tanks at a high level, I'm sure he'll be okay. The backline of CJ and Bliss has some serious potential to be one of the best backlines this season. Both of them had a really good season on Twisted Minds and Nightmare last season, and they have a lot of upside. This team is full of talent, and if things go their way, I wouldn't be surprised to see them at the Champions Clash. The other partnered team in NA is Team Liquid, making their long-awaited return after being absent from Overwatch Esports since 2017. For context on this team had Fury on it, like pre-Overwatch League Fury. Crazy shit. This team, though, is stacked from head to toe. The DPS line consists of Knife and Tree, and man, what a nasty duo. Tree has been dominating for a couple years now, and on paper, this is the best team he's ever had. Tree is a nasty good hitscan and has the potential to take this region by storm. His new duo, Korean DPS Knife, has been insanely good and underrated for a good couple years now. He put in some serious work last season on Yeti and Fnatic, and he was one of the main reasons those teams took maps and series off of Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon. On the solo tank, we'll have Infected, and this is probably the best NA tank you could have gotten. If Infected is able to be flexible and play every tank he needs to, then I expect another great year from this guy. The former Toronto backline duo of RuPaul and Vega really helped complete this team, already having synergy and having shown us last season that they can be the best backline in North America. This team looks like a scary NA super team and has a real shot at winning this region. But will anyone else be able to compete? 6 other teams made it through the qualifiers, those being Nightmare, Timeless, Avidity, Rad Esports, Shikigami, and Amplify. Let's start things out with Nightmare, who I'm surprised weren't offered a partner spot considering all they've done to support OWCS. Regardless of this though, the new Nightmare squad has a couple returning players from last season. Those being Lethal, Zira, Admiral, and Clear. Joining them are DPS player Vision, Aussie tank player Kuffa, and NA support legend Ultraviolet. On paper, this Nightmare squad is extremely stacked and have a ton of potential to fight for a top spot. Zira is looking to continue his great performances from last season, and Lethal and Vision provide a very strong hitscan duo. Having both Clear and Kuffa will help a lot with flexibility, and they should be able to cover most tanks. Admiral and Ultraviolet is a really solid support line that should be able to play whatever support is needed. In general, this roster has a ton of depth, and they should be able to compete regardless of the meta. Keep your eyes on Nightmare, they are absolutely a team to watch out for. Also making their return, we have Timeless, who feature a good chunk of last season's TSM squad. Rocket and Chopper are always a solid DPS duo, having been around the NA scene for quite a while now. Last year, Riker showed us that he was a pretty good tank player, and although he will be solo tanking, I believe he has the ability to succeed. Luke Mino and Squid have also shown their skills and are looking to prove themselves at an elite level. This team has a lot of upside, but they haven't quite shown that they're on the level of some of these elite talents around. Last season, the TSM squad struggled a lot, and honestly, I'm sure they're really eager to prove that they have grown a lot this season and that last year was just a rough one. But if they want to compete, they really have to play up to that potential because the NA region is stacked this year. Rad Esports are another one of those teams that are looking to try to make it into a top spot. This team has a really nice 3-man DPS line of King, Chronic, and Peace that could honestly compete with some of these stacked rosters. King in particular showed us flashes of being that guy last year, and hopefully we can see more of that this season. This team is a tank duo of Zeb and Painkiller, both of whom are up-and-coming tank players, and it would be really nice for them not have to solo tank. They get to just focus on their comfort heroes and just play as good as they can. Z and Left make up the backline, and I'm really intrigued to see how they perform. Z was super good in calling out heroes on Nightmare Eclipse, and Left has been a pretty solid main support the last couple years. I don't exactly expect this team to get number 1, but they're absolutely a squad to keep an eye on because they just might make a run. Avidity makes their return, sporting a pretty solid underdog squad. This team has a very good DPS trio of Zomba, NVM, or Nevermind, however you pronounce that, and Wub, which has a ton of upsides. You know, Wub heads rise. Bulls will be solo tanking on this team, and we've seen pretty good tank performances, specifically on off tanks last season. But I'm a little concerned if we get a main tank meta. NY and Scuffed are a pretty good support line, and as a whole, this team is solid. I'm not really sure how far they'll go, but this is definitely one of those teams looking to punch upwards. You know, there's a lot of those in NA this year. I'm not really sure who's going to get those middle of the pack spots, but these teams are really going to have to compete to show what they mean business. Once again, Shikigami makes their way into another stage, and I've got to say, good on Shikigami for consistently being able to make it into these tournaments. It's no easy feat to be able to qualify just as much as they do. And although they haven't gotten too far in each of these tournaments, just making the top 8 is an achievement on its own. This team has a ton of underdogs and question marks, but a couple known players like Solo and Graveyard can absolutely help bolster this team and try to fight to make the top 6 bracket. As for Amplify, not a ton of known players on this team, which honestly makes them more exciting. We get to see some new faces, and we get to see how well these guys can play. Not having a lot of expectations on this squad honestly might help them out, since, you know, there's way less pressure for them to perform. It's a cool achievement to even make it here, so I'm excited to see if this team can make a splash and continue even forward. As for my predictions, I have Team Liquid and Spacestation Gaming making it to the Champions Clash. But then again, I really wouldn't be surprised to see a team like Nightmare or Timeless take one of those spots. NA looks really competitive this year, but not having Energy or Toronto will leave a lot more opportunities for a new king of NA to rise up this year. Keep an eye on Knife this season. I have a feeling that Bro is about to go nuclear on this region. As a whole, I'm very excited for this season of OWCS. There are a lot of cool new teams and players, and hopefully lots of good games to watch in the future. I'll be making sure to cover this season as much as I can, so if you want to see more of this stuff, subscribing to the channel is an easy way to show me some support. Leave a comment down below letting me know who you think is going to win OWCS Stage 1. If you liked this video, leave a like, all that jazz. Thank you all so much for 20k views on that C9 video. I really liked that one, and it means a whole lot to me to see that you guys liked it too. With all that said, thank you so much for watching.